All right, we spent the first part of the show taking your calls, asking you what side you're on here. Canada flight attendants, Air Canada, the company, talking about the fact that flight attendants have now made it clear, their union has anyway, that it will not send workers, flight attendants, back to the job, despite what the Canada Industrial Relations Board has urged them, or basically, I guess, beyond urging, has ruled that they have to do. So they're on an unlawful strike, but they plan to stay that way, at least for the time being. Part of the discussion here, when I talk about the Air Canada flight attendants and which side do you support here, is the fact that we know there are thousands, literally, I think over 100,000, they said, 130,000 people affected by this strike, stuck in various places around the world, unable to book flights, unable to get a hold of Air Canada to rebook other flights. So maybe it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's already the consideration of a new class action lawsuit to seek reimbursements and compensation in regards to this strike. Joey Zukran is a class action attorney. He's on the line. So, Joey, this only happened Saturday. How quick can you work something like this?
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Actually, the Air Canada released figures today. It's 500,000 people that are affected worldwide.
Wow. So, we've heard stories, I'm sure you've heard the same ones, people being stranded here, stranded there, couldn't get anything from Air Canada. We had an airline analyst in here the other day suggesting, look, they're going to offer you a refund. Don't take the refund. Have them book you another flight. They're obliged to do that. But it turns out for most people, I think that hasn't happened. So what are you going to do here?
So how could you have somebody or a company who doesn't answer you, who doesn't respond and disconnects when you try to reach them, book you on a new flight? So that's one of the reasons, you said we worked quickly. We actually waited 4 or 5 days before filing this. We were investigating the case with the law firm of Reno Vatalakis, who we partnered up on this file with. And it turns out Saturday, they canceled the flight of our lead plaintiff. She's a veterinary student who's planning to go to Grenada on Sunday. And she receives an email Saturday saying that Air Canada cannot, obviously the flight's canceled, and that they will try to put her on another flight within 3 days. So the first problem is that is completely contrary to the air passenger protection regulations. They actually have a legal obligation to put people on a flight within 48 hours, their own flight or a company that they have an agreement with. And if they're unable to do that, they have a legal obligation under the same regulation to put you on the next available flight. Now, here's the problem, and everybody is literally in the same basket. Air Canada is telling people there are no other, and I'm getting texts as we speak from other lawyers around the world, one in France. Air Canada is telling people they don't have tickets until, let's say, Friday for this guy stuck in France. But if you go on Kayak or Google Flights or American Airlines, you'll see a menu of options. You'll have a whole menu of different flights leaving today, tomorrow, the day after. So our client said, look, there's a flight leaving tomorrow to Grenada. I'm going to book it with American Airlines. And if when I call Air Canada, they hang up on me, what can I do? And so, the answer is you can sue under the APPR, which is those regulations I just mentioned, as well as under the Montreal Convention. There's case law that allows people to claim damages for loss of enjoyment of vacation under the Montreal Convention, which Air Canada has historically used as a sword to effectively cut itself out of any liability. But in this case, that's going to work against them. It's going to boomerang against them because those very conventions protect the hundreds of thousands of passengers that are trapped.
But let me ask a question here. With respect to this idea of you're stuck in, let's say you brought up France as an example, right?
Yep.
Air Canada's obligation to you is to, as you just said, to book you on another flight within 48 hours. But it's also possible, when you talked about if I went online now to Kayak, for example, and tried to book a flight, you said you could find one, right?
Yeah, anyone
to come back to Montreal. Is Air Canada obliged, if I book that flight for more than my original flight was worth on Air Canada to the same destination, are they obliged to pay the value of what I had to spend to book that flight back home?
In my opinion, the answer is yes, because when you read the regulation, it says the next available flight. And with a comparable itinerary, right? So our client actually had a comparable ticket. So our client actually had a dog, not a service pet, but an actual pet. And the flight they tried to rebook her on more than 86 hours later, which Air Caribbean didn't allow pets. You'd have to put it in cargo, which you can't do due to the age. So the answer is the regulation does not limit it to price. Obviously, there are other airlines. I've seen Air Transat, and I will call them out, charging $3,000 or $4,000 for flights that don't even have I don't even want to describe the plane. But I'm hearing horror stories of other companies gouging, taking advantage. That's a debate for another day. Maybe there'll be some investigations into that. But to answer your question, yes, they have to put you on the next available flight. And if that comes at a cost to them, the question is, who should be bearing the cost? Should it be the passengers, Monsieur, Madame, tout le monde, there that are traveling 4 or 5 people in a family and have to come up with $15,000 to come back, or should it be Air Canada, who's the publicly traded corporation worth, I think, several $billion as of today still? So,
okay, so this is not the first time. I mean, I realize, I think I checked before, it said that there had not last been a flight attendant strike at Air Canada in 1985. So I was going to say, is there precedence for this? There have been strikes before. What happens in cases like this? And do airlines end up paying up?
So I wasn't around in 1985 to tell you how that ended. It seems, you by the way, you don't need a class action. People can file claims in small claims court or other, recourses you have. Just it seems that most people, unfortunately, don't know that they have a recourse. They see Air Canada's email as being, some type of, formal position that's the law. It's not true. It's actually wrong and contrary to the regulations. But ultimately, for us, the regulations seem very clear. They absolutely have to refund people who paid for their own way back. And in addition, if some people have horror stories of loss of enjoyment during travel, during vacation, we have a claim for that as well.
Okay.
So I think the chances of success are very good.
Let me ask the judge to decide. Let me ask the question that you brought up before about Air Canada using this in the past to get out of having to pay. What about this whole idea that this was out of their control? Right? It's not about weather. This is about there's a strike. There's nothing they could do. Can they use that as a defense?
So the answer is no, because the section that we're invoking in our lawsuit is Section 18, and that only applies when Section 10 applies, and Section 10 applies to strikes that are considered out of their control. So the provisions and the obligations we just discussed a few minutes ago apply when it's a situation outside of Air Canada's control, which according to Canadian regulations is a strike. My understanding in Europe is that a strike is not considered out of the airline's control. So, but at least at the bare minimum, their obligation is to get you on the next available flight, and we all know they're not doing that. They're making people wait days to get back.
By the way, I had a caller on before when I asked the question just after 2:00 who described the situation where his wife was coming back from the Dominican Republic. She had an Air Canada flight. It had been canceled. They actually rebooked her. We're very, very, careful about making sure she got on whatever flight it was like a day later, got her lounge access. This is not everybody. So if somebody has found themselves in a situation where they weren't getting any help from Air Canada, is the idea, Joey, to go ahead and be part of this class action suit, or go ahead and do it on your own, or can you do both?
Look, if you can't be paid twice. When you're telling me you have a friend who had a lounge, I'm going to get lounge access. I'm going to get this. There was maybe some type of super elite status, because I don't know too many people who had lounge access. The story we're hearing are people, including on the ground of our clients and others, are people literally who are unable to reach Air Canada and getting hung up on, and no recourse whatsoever. So somebody got lucky. If you can file your own claim and deal directly with the airline and get paid, go ahead. I mean, the last thing I want to be, is telling people not to get paid now. These class actions can sometimes take several years. My feeling is that Air Canada is not going to be so easy to pay out $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in flights to people who are legally entitled to them. Mm-hmm. But if you can do it on your own, go ahead. And
you would do that if you did it on your own. You do that through small claims court.
So you can always write a letter to Air Canada. You could send a formal demand
and hope for the best.
Hope for the best. You can go to small claims court. There's different ways, but or you can be part of the class action and do nothing. And as often is the case, you'll receive a notice in the mail one day saying it's either been successful or not, and here's how you can get paid. Okay.
My only other question, because we got to wrap up, is let's say you're part of this class action suit. It does get settled. I've seen a lot of these say, okay, here's a check for $50 or $100, and settle the visit, whatever. What happens here when you're out thousands of dollars as part of a class action?
Good question. Our last case, the settlements or the awards that are made are only based on the strength of the case. Our last case that we did with LPC Avocat and Renaud Vatalakis involving Air Canada, we actually it had to do with the UK tax, and we got people 100% of the money that was overcharged or unlawfully charged according to the allegations in the lawsuit. We just, with the same two firms, settled for $500 million, the bread case with Loblaws.
Right.
So,
okay.
I mean, And if anyone's received an I'll plug that case in as well. The e-transfer in the Apple Care class action, some people are getting several $100s, and I'm sure many listeners are wondering whether that email is legit. So I could confirm it is. If you received an email from Rice Point about Apple Care, it's legit. You can deposit it. It's from our offices. So each case, turns on its own facts,
right? Okay.
and circumstances. But we'll do our best to get you the most.
Joey Zukran. Joey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, there you go. 2 days later, Air Canada class action suit. And as he said, I imagine, given the fact that I'm not sure, I've not heard that number before, 500,000 people affected by this. But that's what he said. And if that's the case, boy, this is going to come to a lot of money for Air Canada.